There's something more terrifying than seeing the monster is realizing no one is coming to save you. Bryn Adams lives alone, not by choice, but by consequence. Her house, isolated at the edge of town, feels less like a home and more like a quiet exile. The world hasn't just moved on without her, it has rejected her. The town avoids her, conversation stopped when she walks by, eyes follow her, not with curiosity, but with judgment. Bryn seeks, but she doesn't belong. But the real isolation hasn't even begun yet. One night, the silence changes. Not the familiar kick of good, not the whisper of the wind. Something else, something wrong. And when Bryn opens her eyes, she's no longer alone. What follows isn't in a typical island invasion. There are no explosions, no heroic speeches, no warning from the sky. Only breath, hers and theirs. Tall, unnatural figures move through her home with impossible stillness. Their body are things almost fragile, but their presence is overwhelming. Their eyes don't show anger, they show nothing. And somehow, that's worse. They are not here to destroy, they are here for something else. Something precise, something deliberate, and Bryn is part of it. A house that breathes fear. The film transformed her home into a living trap. Every hallway becomes a corridor of tension. Every doorway a point of no return. Large windows expose her instead of protecting her. There is nowhere to hide, nowhere to feel safe, and yet the real horror isn't in what's inside the house, it's what's inside her. Because Bryn isn't just fighting to survive the night, she's fighting something much older. Guilt, grief, memory. A past that never let her move on. The radical silence. One of the film's boldest choices is its near total absence of dialogue. Bryn barely speaks, not because she can't, but because no one ever listened. Director Brian Duffield strips away language to force us into her world. We don't just watch her isolation, we feel it. Every breath mirrors, every step echoes, every silence becomes unbearable. Caitlin Dever carries the entire film through physical performance alone. Fear, pain, regret. It's all there in her eyes, in the way she moves, in the way she hesitates. This isn't just acting, it's survival through expressions. The sound of being watched. The score, composed by Joseph Traspens, doesn't behave like traditional film music. It doesn't guide you, it answers you. Low frequency pulses creep under your skin, distorted tones bend reality, silence stretches longer than it should, just long enough to make you uneasy. Sometimes there is no music at all, and that's when it's most terrifying, because silence doesn't mean safety, it means something is waiting. The aliens, observers, not monsters. The extraterrestrials in this film are driven by rage. They are driven by curiosity. Different types appears throughout the story. Some observe, some control, some command, but none of them behave like typical cinematic villains. They don't rush, they don't panic, they study. When they capture Bryn, they don't torture her, they examine her. They see her memories, her past, her trauma, the moment that define her life and isolate her from everyone else. And then they make a decision. The truth beneath the invasion. This is where the film quietly changes, because No One Will Save You isn't real about aliens, it's about belonging. Bryn was already living like an outsider long before they arrived. The invasion doesn't take her out of the world, it reveals that she was never fully part of it to begin with. And in a strange, uncertain way, the aliens understand her better than humans ever did. One of the boldest creative decisions was the near total absence of dialogue, as I told you before. Writer-director Brian Duffield originally experimented with dialogue in early drafts, but realized the story became far more tense and immersive when stripped down. The final film reportedly contains only a handful of spoken words, forcing everything, emotion, fear, or narrative clarity to come through performance, sound design, and visual storytelling. That choice placed enormous pressure on every other department. Caitlin Dever's performance became the backbone of the film because of that decision. She had to carry long stretches along screen, reacting to things that often weren't physically present during filming. Much of the alien interaction was added later through visual effects, so Dever relied heavily on imagination, timing cues, and direction. The production even used practical makers and stand-ins to help her maintain spatial awareness during intense sequences. The film was shot in a relatively tight schedule, which is surprising in considering how polished and controlled it feels. Duffield wanted and contained almost theatrical energy, so much of the story takes place in and around a single house. That allowed the team to focus on atmosphere, blocking, and camera movement rather than constant location changes. Speaking of the house, it was carefully designed to function almost like a character. The layout wasn't random, it was built to allow fluid camera movements and to support tension. Hallways, windows, and sightlines were all planned so that the audience could feel both safe and exposed at the same time. The geography of the space becomes crucial once the invasion begins. The aliens themselves went through multiple design interactions. The team avoided overly complex or heavily stylized creatures in favor of something more unsettlingly simple. This appearance draws from classic grey aliens imaginary, but with subtle modern updates in movement and texture. The goal was familiarity mixed with discomfort, something recognizable but not entirely predictable. Sound design plays a massive role in the film's identity. Since dialogue is minimal, every creak, footstep, and ambient noise had to carry narrative weight. The filmmakers leaned into silence as much as sound, creating contrast that amplifies tension. In many scenes, what you don't hear becomes just as important as what you do. The score by Joseph Trapanese complements this approach by being selective rather than constant. Instead of overwhelming scenes, the music often sleeps in quietly and builds in unconventional ways, letting the soundscape breathe. This restraint helps maintain the film's intimate and airy tone. Another interesting challenge was balancing horror with clarity, without dialogue to explain what's happening. The visuals had to be extremely precise. The film be focused on clean visual storytelling, clear actions, readable reactions, and strong cause and effect sequences, so the audience could follow the story instinctively. The film was released directly in Hulu in the United States, which shaped its reach and reception. Despite not having a traditional theatrical rollout, it gained strong word of mouth, especially because of its unusual structure and diverse performance. Many viewers highlighted how refreshing it felt compared to more dialogue-heavy gender films. Critically, one of the most talked about aspects was its ending. Without getting into spoilers, it sparked a discussion because it leans into interpretation rather than straightforward resolutions, something that fits with the film's overall minimalistic approach. Finally, Brian Duffield, who had previously worked as a screenwriter on larger studio projects, used this film to assert a more personal voice as director. The stripped-down concept, the risk-taking structure, and the reliance on visual storytelling all point to a filmmaker intentionally stepping away from conventional formulas. All of these elements together makes No One Will Save You feel very controlled and deliberate, like every silence, every movement, and every frame had to earn its place. No One Will Save You is not a story about an invasion from the start. It's a story about what happens when someone is abandoned by their own word. The aliens don't come to destroy her, they come to understand her and maybe to free her, because sometimes the scariest thing isn't in being hunted, it's being seen and realizing you were never meant to be safe.